When sister got into med school, my parents threw a huge party. When I got in, my mom said, "We didn't think you'd actually make it." So I planned something small, just close friends. 2 weeks later, my mom found out she wasn't on the guest list from a photo in the local paper. I, 27M, got my acceptance letter on a Tuesday afternoon. The thick envelope sat on my desk for almost 20 minutes before I opened it, because some part of me still expected rejection. 4 years of pre-med, countless sleepless nights, a GPA I'd clawed my way to maintain, and 3 rounds of interviews that left me mentally exhausted. When I finally tore it open and saw the word congratulations, I just sat there, staring at it. My hands were shaking when I called home. Mom picked up on the 3rd ring, and I told her I got into medical school. There was a pause, just long enough to make my stomach drop, before she responded. She said that was nice, that she was happy for me. Then she asked if I'd heard from my sister lately, mentioned something about her research project, and the conversation drifted away from my news entirely. The whole call lasted maybe 4 minutes. I stood in my apartment afterward, acceptance letter still in my hand, and remembered something from 3 years ago. When my sister got her acceptance, my parents rented out the entire back room of an Italian restaurant downtown. They invited everyone, extended family, neighbors, my dad's colleagues, people from their church group. There were maybe 70 people there. My dad gave a speech about how proud he was, how he always knew she'd achieve great things. My mom cried happy tears and posted about 15 photos on social media with captions about her brilliant daughter. I was there that night, obviously. I congratulated my sister, ate expensive pasta, and smiled through the whole thing. Nobody asked me about my own medical school plans. I was still finishing my undergrad then, grinding through organic chemistry and physics, but it was like I didn't exist in that room full of celebration. The following weekend, I drove home for dinner. My parents seemed cheerful enough, asked about work and if I was eating properly. Near the end of the meal, my dad mentioned my acceptance almost as an afterthought, like I'd told him I'd renewed my car registration. He said it was good that I finally got in, that medical school would be challenging for someone like me. Someone like me. I asked what he meant, and he just shrugged, said I'd always been more of a late bloomer, that things came harder to me than they did to my sister. My mom jumped in then, and this is the part that stuck in my chest like a splinter. She said they honestly hadn't thought I'd actually make it. She said it casually, like she was commenting on the weather. They thought maybe I'd end up doing something else, something more suited to my abilities. She mentioned my sister's name in comparison, said she'd always been naturally gifted. The word naturally hit different. Like my effort didn't count. Like the 4 years I destroyed myself to succeed were just me struggling to keep up with where my sister had been from the start. I didn't argue. I just nodded, finished my coffee, and drove back to my apartment. The whole drive, I kept replaying her words. "We didn't think you'd actually make it." Not even a hint of apology in her voice. No awareness that maybe that was a cruel thing to say to your son. I spent the next few days thinking about what I wanted to do. My roommate suggested I confront them, tell them how much that hurt. But I knew my parents. They'd deflect, say I was being too sensitive, turn it into a lecture about not being able to take criticism. That's how it always went. My sister could do no wrong, and I could do no right. Simple as that. So I decided on something else. I started planning a celebration, just like my sister had. But this time, I'd do it my way. I reached out to my close friends, the people who'd actually been there through the worst of pre-med. My study group, who'd pulled all-nighters with me during finals. My roommate, who'd talked me down from panic attacks before interviews. A couple of professors who'd written my recommendation letters and genuinely believed in me. My girlfriend, who'd watched me stress-eat instant ramen at 3 in the morning while reviewing biochemistry notes. These were my people. The ones who knew how hard I'd worked, who never doubted I'd make it. I called my uncle on my dad's side, the only family member who ever seemed to give a damn about me beyond surface level. He'd checked in throughout my entire application process, sent encouraging texts before my interviews. When I told him about the party, he was immediately enthusiastic, said he'd absolutely be there. I mentioned I wasn't inviting my parents or sister. He went quiet for a second, then asked if I was sure. I told him about what my mom said, about the whole pattern of favoritism that had defined my childhood. He sighed and said he understood, that he'd noticed it too over the years, but hadn't felt like it was his place to say anything. He told me he was proud of me and that he'd keep the party quiet from the rest of the family. I booked a private room at a nice restaurant, Nothing as fancy as what my parents had done for my sister, but nicer than anywhere I usually ate. Sent out proper invitations, the kind you order online with custom printing. Set the date for 2 weeks out. 15 people total, small enough to feel intimate, big enough to feel like a real celebration. My girlfriend helped with the planning. She was angry on my behalf about the whole situation, said my parents sounded toxic, and that I deserved better. We picked out decorations, organized a cake, even put together a slideshow of photos from my pre-med journey. She suggested inviting my parents anyway, taking the high road. I told her I was done with high roads that led nowhere. The week before the party, I posted one photo on social media. Just the invitation itself, with a caption about celebrating new beginnings with the people who matter most. A few friends commented congratulations. My parents didn't see it. I'd limited my posts so they didn't show up in their feed months ago after my mom kept leaving passive-aggressive comments comparing my life choices to my sister's. What I didn't anticipate was the local paper getting involved. One of my professors, the one who'd written my strongest recommendation letter, was apparently friends with a reporter who covered human interest stories. She reached out asking to do a small piece about local students getting into medical school. I almost said no, but my girlfriend convinced me it would be a nice way to mark the achievement. The reporter came to my apartment, did a short interview, took a few photos. It felt surreal, someone actually treating my acceptance like it mattered. The article ran that Thursday, 3 days before my party. It was a half-page spread in the local section, nothing major, but there was a decent photo of me holding my acceptance letter, and the article mentioned the celebration I was planning. It listed the restaurant name and date. The reporter had done her research. She'd talked to my professors, included quotes about my work ethic and determination. It was the kind of recognition I'd secretly wanted my whole life, but never expected to get. I didn't think my parents read the local paper. They'd never mentioned it before. Saturday arrived, and the party was everything I'd hoped for. The restaurant had set up the private room beautifully, with congratulations banners and white tablecloths. My friends showed up dressed up, brought gifts and cards. My uncle came early and helped with last-minute setup, kept telling me how proud he was. My girlfriend gave a toast that made me tear up, talking about all the nights she'd watched me doubt myself and how she never doubted me once. People shared stories, laughed, ate good food. The cake was perfect. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuinely happy about my acceptance, like I'd earned the right to celebrate it. We took group photos throughout the night. Someone hired a photographer as a surprise gift, so we had professional shots of the whole thing. My uncle took a photo with me, his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning. That one ended up being my favorite of the night. Sunday morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from my mom. 17. Plus a string of text messages that started angry and escalated to furious. I sat up in bed, my head still fuzzy from the night before, and scrolled through them with a growing sense of disbelief. She'd seen the newspaper article. A friend from her church group had brought it to her attention, asked why they hadn't been at their son's celebration. My mom had no idea what she was talking about, so the friend showed her the article on her phone. That's when everything exploded. The texts were brutal. She demanded to know why I'd thrown a party without telling them. Asked how I could be so cruel and selfish. Said I'd embarrassed them in front of their friends and the community. Said I was ungrateful after everything they'd done for me. That last part almost made me laugh. Everything they'd done for me apparently didn't include basic emotional support or believing I could succeed. I didn't respond right away. I made coffee, ate breakfast, let myself wake up properly. My girlfriend came over, read the messages, and suggested I just block them. But I knew that would make things worse, and I still had stuff at their house I needed to retrieve eventually. Finally, around noon, I called my mom back. She answered immediately, her voice sharp and accusatory. She asked what I was thinking, how I could exclude my own parents from something so important. I stayed calm, told her I'd celebrated with the people who actually supported me through the process. She tried to interrupt, but I kept talking. I reminded her what she'd said when I told her about my acceptance, how she'd said they didn't think I'd actually make it. I told her that hurt, that it was the culmination of years of feeling like I was never good enough in their eyes. She went silent for a moment, then claimed she didn't remember saying that I was exaggerating. She said I was taking things out of context, that she'd only meant I'd faced more challenges than my sister. I asked why they threw my sister a huge party with 70 guests, but couldn't even pretend to be excited when I got in. She said that was different, that my sister's acceptance was unexpected at the time, more surprising. The irony was staggering. My sister's success was surprising and worth celebrating, but mine wasn't because they'd expected me to fail. The conversation went in circles. She cried, said I was breaking her heart, that I was tearing the family apart. I told her the family had felt broken to me for a long time, that she'd just never noticed because she was too focused on my sister. She hung up on me. My dad called 10 minutes later. His approach was different, more disappointed than angry. He said I should have been the bigger person, that family comes first no matter what. I asked him why family didn't come first when I needed support and encouragement. He said I was being dramatic, that they'd always supported me. I listed examples. Every school event where they left early to take my sister somewhere, every achievement of mine that got dismissed, every time they compared us and found me lacking. He said I was remembering things wrong, that I had a victim complex. That was when I stopped caring about being polite. I told him I was done trying to earn approval I was never going to get. I said the party was perfect because it was full of people who actually gave a damn about me, and that he and Mom weren't among them. He tried to argue, but I hung up. My sister called that evening. She'd heard about everything from our parents, and she wanted to know my side. I was surprised she bothered to ask. We'd never been close, not really, but we'd never been hostile either. I explained everything, the whole history of feeling second best, the comment about them not thinking I'd make it, the decision to celebrate without them. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she admitted she'd always known our parents favored her, but she hadn't realized how much it affected me. She said she felt guilty, that she should have said something or stood up for me over the years. I appreciated that, but it didn't change anything. She said she'd try to talk to them, make them understand. I told her not to bother, that I was moving on with or without their understanding. The next few weeks were tense. My parents tried a few more times to reach out, alternating between guilt-tripping and anger. Extended family members started getting involved, people I barely knew suddenly having opinions about my choices. Some sided with my parents, said I was being disrespectful. Others, including my uncle, defended me, said my parents needed to take responsibility for their behavior. What surprised me most was the response from my parents' social circle. The newspaper article had made rounds in their community, and apparently, several people had approached them asking about the party, commenting on the article, congratulating them. Each time, my parents had to admit they weren't there, weren't invited. My mom couldn't spin it into her usual narrative because the article clearly showed I'd succeeded despite low expectations. Their friends weren't stupid, they could read between the lines. My mom sent a long email about 3 weeks after the party. It was different from her earlier messages, less angry, more reflective. She admitted that maybe they'd been harder on me than necessary, that maybe they'd shown favoritism toward my sister. She said she never meant to make me feel inadequate, that she'd only wanted to push me to be better. She asked if we could talk, try to work things out. I read it several times, looking for a genuine apology, but it wasn't there. Just justifications and maybes. I responded briefly, said I appreciated her reaching out, but needed space. I told her I'd be willing to rebuild our relationship eventually, but only if they could acknowledge the damage they'd caused without qualifications or excuses. My dad never apologized directly. He sent a short text saying he hoped I'd reconsider cutting them out, that they loved me and wanted to be part of my life. But love without respect or support isn't worth much. Update 1. It has been about 2 months since the party incident, and things have shifted in ways I didn't fully expect. I started medical school 3 weeks ago, and the workload is absolutely brutal, which has been a blessing in disguise. Having to memorize entire systems of the human body doesn't leave much time to dwell on family drama. My parents attempted to show up at my apartment unannounced last month. I wasn't home. I was at orientation, but my roommate texted me that they'd stopped by with a gift bag and seemed upset when they found out I wasn't there. They left the bag with my roommate. Inside was a card congratulating me on medical school and a check for $2,000. The card was signed by both parents, with a note saying they wanted to support my education and hoped we could move past our disagreement. I sat with that for a few days. My girlfriend thought I should cash the check and keep the emotional distance. My uncle thought I should return it, make a clean break. I ended up doing something in between. I called my dad and told him I appreciated the gesture, but couldn't accept money as a substitute for an actual conversation about our relationship. He sounded frustrated, said I was being stubborn, that they were trying. I told him trying would look like acknowledging what they'd done wrong, not just throwing money at the problem. He agreed to meet for coffee, just the two of us. We met at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between my apartment and their house. It was awkward at first, both of us ordering drinks and making small talk about nothing important. Then he finally brought up the party, said my mom was still hurt that I'd excluded them. I asked if he understood why I'd excluded them. He admitted he'd been thinking about it, about the things I'd said during our last argument. He said he could see how it might have looked like favoritism from my perspective, but that wasn't their intention. He said my sister just needed more attention growing up because she was more driven, more ambitious, and they wanted to nurture that. That explanation somehow made it worse. I told him that deciding one child needs more attention because they're naturally talented is the definition of favoritism. I asked what message that sent to me, the kid who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. He didn't have a good answer. We talked for over an hour. He apologized, sort of. He said he was sorry I felt overlooked, sorry if they'd made mistakes in how they treated us. The if bothered me, but it was more than I'd gotten before. He asked if I'd be willing to have dinner with them, try to start fresh. I told him I'd think about it, but couldn't promise anything. My sister and I have actually been talking more. She called me a week into medical school to ask how it was going, and we ended up having a real conversation for maybe the first time in years. She admitted that our parents' favoritism had affected her too, just differently. She said she'd always felt this pressure to be perfect, to live up to their expectations, and that it had caused her massive anxiety throughout her life. She'd never felt like she could fail or show weakness because she was supposed to be the golden child. I'd never thought about it from that angle. We weren't on opposite sides exactly. We'd both been damaged by our parents' approach, just in different ways. She said she'd talked to them multiple times since the party incident, tried to make them see how their behavior looked from outside their perspective. She said Mom had cried a lot, that she was genuinely confused about why I was so upset, because she'd thought she was being helpful by being honest about their expectations. That conversation with my sister changed something for me. I was still angry at my parents, still hurt, but I could see them more clearly as flawed people who'd screwed up rather than villains who'd deliberately tried to wound me. It didn't excuse anything, but it gave me context. 3 weeks ago, I agreed to have dinner with my parents. Just us, no extended family, at their house. I drove over on a Saturday evening, my stomach in knots the whole way. My mom answered the door and immediately hugged me, holding on longer than usual. She looked older somehow, more tired. My dad shook my hand, patted my shoulder, led me inside. Dinner was my mom's lasagna, the same recipe she'd made for every family gathering since I was a kid. We ate mostly in silence at first, the awkwardness thick enough to cut. Then my mom put down her fork and said she wanted to talk about everything that had happened. She said she'd been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting on how she'd raised us. She said she could see now that she'd treated my sister and me differently, and that it wasn't fair. She got emotional, said she'd never wanted to hurt me, that she'd honestly thought she was helping by being realistic about my abilities. She thought if she kept my expectations low, I wouldn't be devastated if I failed. I told her that approach had just made me feel worthless, like my own mother didn't believe in me. She cried then, actually broke down, said she'd done everything wrong and didn't know how to fix it. My dad put his arm around her, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, maybe shame, maybe regret. I didn't forgive them on the spot. I told them it would take time, that they'd hurt me deeply and repeatedly over the years, and one conversation couldn't undo all of that. But I said I was willing to try to rebuild something, as long as they understood it would be on different terms. I wasn't going to keep begging for their approval or acceptance. Either they could respect me as I was, or we'd stay distant. They both agreed. My dad said he was proud of me for getting into medical school, said it with actual emotion in his voice. My mom asked if she could come visit me sometime, see my apartment, maybe take me to lunch. I said okay, but not yet. I needed space still. Update 2. Medical school is consuming my life in the best way possible. I'm 4 months in now, and while the workload is insane, I feel like I'm finally where I'm supposed to be. My study group has become like a second family, and my girlfriend has been incredibly patient with my constant stress and exhaustion. My relationship with my parents has slowly improved, though it's nothing like what it was before, and honestly, that's probably better. We're building something new, something with actual boundaries and mutual respect. My mom visits once a month now, takes me to lunch, asks about school without comparing me to my sister. My dad calls every couple of weeks to check in, keeps the conversations focused on me rather than their expectations. The biggest change came 2 weeks ago. My parents asked if they could host a dinner to celebrate my progress in medical school, said they wanted to do something they should have done from the start. I was hesitant, worried it was performative, but my sister encouraged me to let them try. She said they'd been genuinely working on themselves, that she'd seen the change. They kept the dinner small this time, just immediate family, my girlfriend, and my uncle. No massive production, no social media spectacle. Just a quiet evening where my dad gave a short toast about being proud of both his children, acknowledging that he and my mom hadn't always shown that pride equally. My mom gave me a framed photo from my celebration party, the one with me and my uncle. She'd gotten it from my social media. She said she wanted me to know she was proud of that moment, even though she hadn't been part of it. It wasn't perfect. Years of damage don't heal in a few months. But it was real, and that mattered more than any huge party ever could have. I realized I didn't need them to erase the past or pretend it never happened. I just needed them to acknowledge it and do better going forward. The revenge I'd planned with that party had accomplished what I'd wanted. It forced a reckoning, made them face the consequences of their favoritism. But what came after was something I hadn't anticipated: actual growth, actual change. Not just from them, but from me too. I learned that I didn't need their validation to know my worth. Medical school acceptance proved that to me. My friends and girlfriend proved that to me. My own resilience proved that to me. I still keep that newspaper article framed in my apartment. Not as a reminder of revenge, but as a reminder of what I achieved despite the doubt, including my own. Sometimes the best revenge is succeeding anyway, and then deciding whether the people who doubted you deserve a place in your new life. My parents are earning that place, slowly. And I'm okay with slow, because anything worth having is worth building carefully, with intention and honesty. That's something they never taught me, but I learned it anyway.